Let's break that down. The decision by the RBA to lift rates today, the reaction from the Prime Minister, Treasurer and the opposition. Let's bring in my colleague Andrew Clennell. But Governor Lowe there was clear the RBA board did not factor in politics in the political equation when making that decision today.
Yes, he said that. He also suggested that eventually rates will be back up from the 0.35 they're about to get to 2.5%. So several more rate rises on the way. Let's unpack some of this. Scott Morrison, in the defence of the rates going up at this time and the cost of living pressures, pointed to several things in this statement from the Reserve Bank. You heard some of them repeated there by Philip Lowe. One is they say the board judged that now was the right time to begin withdrawing some of the extraordinary monetary support that was put in place to help the Australian economy during the pandemic. They also pointed to unemployment reaching 3.5% by early 2023, the lowest rate of unemployment in almost 50 years. And they said wages were up, and Labor have been calling for wages growth. It says the bank's business liaison suggests that wages growth has been picking up in a tight labour market. An increasing number of firms are paying higher wages to attract and retain staff, especially in an environment where cost of living is rising. So that's the good news. The bad news is the interest rate increase and this. They predict next year economic growth in Australia will be just 2%, far lower than budget forecasts. And when both sides of politics are saying they're paying for the budget repair of nearly $1 trillion debt through growth of the economy, good luck according to these forecasts. Also, this RBA forecast an inflation rate which will rise to 6%. Well, Scott Morrison, he cherry-picked some of that statement in order to launch a defence of things that were going on at the moment and present his case that even though there are tough times, you need to stick with his experience on the economy. Let's have a listen.
Here we are today, an economy that is coming out of this pandemic stronger than most of the advanced economies in the world today. The Reserve Bank has made a very important statement about where we are now in our journey out of this pandemic. That it is appropriate to start the process of normalising monetary conditions. Importantly, he states that wages growth has been picking up.
And here's Treasurer Josh Frydenberg blaming global factors alone for inflation and the interest rate rise.
These are global factors that are driving up inflation. Both the COVID pandemic, which has seen supply chains disrupted, and the war in Ukraine, which has seen a spike in fuel and other commodity prices.
So Shadow Treasurer Jim Chalmers says you can't take credit when there's good economic news like low unemployment, but not take blame when there's bad economic news, and pointing very much to this 2% growth forecast.
They expect the economy to only grow 2% next year, well below average, well below trend, very anaemic rates of growth.
And of course, last November, Scott Morrison promised that under the Liberals, there will be lower petrol prices and lower interest rates. He's taken blows to both of those in recent months.
Australia's economic recovery has to be secured by people who have a track record in economic management. Otherwise, you're going to see petrol prices go up, you're going to see electricity prices go up, you're going to see interest rates go up more than they would need to otherwise.
Now, Scott Morrison, he did express some regret for mortgage holders, but not too much. Yesterday, he said this was nothing to do with politics, what was happening with the Reserve Bank today, and Anthony Albanese today said they were desperate comments.
It's not about politics. It's an election. It's not about politics. What happens tomorrow deals with what people pay on their mortgages. That's what I'm concerned about. It's not about what it means for politics.
This is a Prime Minister who is getting really, really desperate, and the comments are getting more and more extreme. For this guy to say that anything is not political, this is a guy who gets up in the morning and what he has for breakfast is political. This is a guy who, when he was in the lodge with quarantining, didn't take his economic policy advisor, he didn't take his national security advisor, he took his photographer. He took his photographer. Everything that this guy does is political. from day to day. It's never about the national interest.
And Paul Murray's interviewed the former Prime Minister John Howard tonight, the last PM to suffer an interest rate rise during an election campaign. In 2007 election he lost. John Howard saying this interest rate rise is not because of government policy.
It doesn't represent any failure of economic management. I mean, if the Labor Party's running around saying, oh, terrible, 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 well, it wasn't terrible having a 0.1% interest rate yesterday, but now it's terrible, terrible, because it's gone from a record low to an almost record low. So let's have a sense of proportion.
That full interview coming up tonight on Paul Murray Live. The last Prime Minister to experience an interest rate rise during an election, that was back in 2007. We know the result of that election as well, but so much of this is going to be dictated by the reaction around the kitchen tables of this country. Let's get a little reaction from the streets of Sydney today after the RBA decision.
Everybody was saying it was going to happen, so I suppose it wasn't a surprise, was it, that it's been lifted? But of course house prices have been so high that for those who are caught up in very expensive mortgages will feel the pinch.
I don't think the interest rate's the issue, it's the availability of housing.
I feel sorry for young people and people starting out. It didn't do Johnny Howard any good when it happened to him.
Andrew, we knew that cost of living was a red-hot political issue at this election. This has exacerbated that further. It's put it right in the centre of the discussion right now with less than 3 weeks to go.
It's kind of bad timing, the inflation figure and the interest rate rise for the government. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Scott Morrison will argue, well, we've got the experience to deal with these challenges, so stick with us. But it doesn't give them the momentum that they need as this campaign continues, Kieran.
No, it doesn't. The other issue that is raised with that rate rise is the impact on property prices. We know so many Australians, the number one asset is the home. So it's, first of all, the extra costs. Secondly, the outlook there, which adds to uncertainty. And today we saw a consumer confidence number, the first in a while, which was down, Andrew.
Yes, well, it doesn't inspire confidence, this rate of inflation. You just don't like to see it, Kieran. And it's bad news. Some tough months ahead on the economy. At least we've got low unemployment.